In the King James or New King James Version, in 1 Timothy 3:16, we would read, "And without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifest in the flesh." Now what we're talking about tonight is whether or not God is the correct reading here. Because in many versions, modern versions, like the NIV, read, "Beyond all question, the mystery from which true godliness springs is great. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit." So, is the textual variant here supposed to be he or God? Well, first, before we look at the textual evidence, let's see what these two different readings would have looked like in the earliest texts, whenever they were handwritten. Here is a bit of a crude example of what the original uncial or majuscule text would have looked like in the Byzantine text and the Alexandrian or critical text. Spot the difference. There were no spaces. All the letters were capitalized. The only difference in this passage, Hos and Theos, in Nomina Sacra formed, Omicron Sigma, Theta Sigma, with a superscripted line above the word that's abbreviated. Very similar. Now that that's in your mind, let's look at what the textual evidence has to say. Here's the passage in the Greek in the UBS 3rd edition. And as you can see, Hos, he who, or actually literally, who was manifested or revealed in the flesh. So, what is the support of this reading over against Theos? Well, down here we have our textual data, and it's given a B rating for Hos, or who, he who, appears in Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus, not in Vaticanus, because Vaticanus does not include the pastoral epistles, Ephraemi Scriptus, G33, which is a very important manuscript, along with the rest. Ha, or again, which, is in Codex Claromontanus, the Old Latin, the Vulgate, and many others. Theos, or God, is in the 5th corrected Sinaiticus, 2nd correction of Alexandrinus, 2nd corrector of Ephraemi Scriptus, 3rd corrector for Claromontanus, as well as the majority or Byzantine text, and 1739, very important late manuscript that has a very early text, and Ha Theos, or God with the article, in minuscule 88. So the textual evidence, the oldest, supporting the reading for who, the majority evidence, and several correctors of the early evidence agree with God. In all reality, the external evidence is about 60-40, 60% leading toward Haas in this area. Whenever Aleph and A and C and 33 agree. We have no papyri for this passage, so that's the external evidence. Internally, it is easy to see, based on what I just showed you before, how similar Haas and Theos look in the unsealed text or majuscule text, and how easily one could have been changed or mistaken for the other. But is it more likely that a scribe copying this text would replace Haas, who was manifest in the flesh, with God was manifest in the flesh? Or would it be more likely that someone would replace God was manifest in the flesh with he who was manifest in the flesh? It is much more likely that someone with a high Christology would say that God was manifested in the flesh to correct he who, and to clarify the passage, making this a very strong evidence for the deity of Christ. So internally, it is extremely likely that someone would have changed Haas to Theos rather than the other way around. But just so you don't have to take my word for it, let's see what Bruce Metzger has to say in his textual commentary. In Bruce Metzger's commentary on the New Testament, we read, "The reading which, on the basis of external evidence and transcriptional probability, best explains the rise of the others, is Haas. It is supported by the earliest and best uncials, Aleph, A, C, G, as well as by 33, 365, 442, 2127, the Syriac, Gothic, Ethiopic, etc. Furthermore, since the neuter relative pronoun ha must have arisen as a scribal correction of Haas to bring the relative into concord with mysterion, or mystery, the witnesses that read ha, so on, also indirectly presuppose Haas as the earlier reading. The Textus Receptus reads Theos, which the third corrector of Aleph. This corrector is of the 12th century, and the other listings. Thus no unsealed in the first hand, earlier than the 8th or 9th century, supports Theos. All ancient versions presuppose Haas or Ah, and no patristic writer prior to the last 3rd or 4th century testifies to the reading of Theos. The reading Theos arose either accidentally through the misreading of Haas as Theos, or deliberately, either to supply a substantive for the following 6 verbs, or, with less probability, to provide greater dogmatic precision. So it is extremely clear that the most likely reading in the original text was Haas, or who, he who appeared in the flesh. Often people will think that this quote-unquote change removes the deity of Christ, saying that instead of God was manifest in the flesh, that he appeared in the flesh. However, the deity of Christ does not rely on this passage alone, but is found in a multitude of passages throughout the New Testament. We want what the apostles wrote. Whether or not it is helpful to our theology or apologetics, we want the truth. And the truth is that more than likely, almost absolutely, the original reading was he. However, we do not lose the deity of Christ in the New Testament. There are numerous other places where it can be affirmed even stronger without having to rely on a textual variant that is possibly not authentic. Thank you for your attention.